Hello and welcome to the Promised Land, everyone. A show about Manchester United and part of the 90 Min Podcast Network. I'm Scott Saunders, joined by Rob Blanchette. We did a live show just after Man United lost 3-2 at home to Galatasaray earlier this week. They now play Brentford. And Rob, are you fearful that there could be yet another defeat on the cards? Because Brentford are pretty hard-working. United are going to have to get their heads on, aren't they?
Yes, Scott, I am fearful. I'll be at Old Trafford, no doubt, as always. And it does feel like a hiding to nothing because of what this Manchester United team is doing at the moment. And it's difficult, Scott, because we talked about some of the positives and we'll do that again today. But Brentford are exactly the kind of team that you don't want to face in this scenario because they will look at you and they will try and expose you for what you are. So we'll talk through a lot of that today.
Yeah, and we're basically going to try and talk about what Eric Ten Hag should do, because I feel like a lot of people are, maybe Ten Hag himself even, are looking at the way that United are playing at the moment and thinking, well, we're very, very easy to play against. There's a lot of, United tend to go man for man and get dragged all over the pitch. There's spaces which appear for the second Galatasaray goal the other day, for example. There was just a massive area on the edge of the box which they scored from. There's obviously errors that are being made. They play hot potato in possession, which is just not a good thing for a team like Man United are. But obviously, Ten Hag is having to manage through injury problems as well. But he's tried this Amrabat at left back thing, and we await what Ten Hag says about Sergio Reguilon in his press conference on Friday afternoon. We're recording before that, so we may have some positive news on him or negative. If you listen to this after Friday afternoon or Friday evening or something like that before the Brentford game. But we will try and plan for what Ten Hag should do if Reguilon is not available. And also, there's a number of senior players who are not performing. So we'll talk about what switches Eric Ten Hag should make potentially through today's show. We'll also do a little bit more on Rasmus Hojlund, because the last show was more of a, wow, that was awful, wasn't it? But the one shining light was Rasmus Hojlund, so we will give him his props today. Subscribe wherever you get your pods, and watch us on YouTube as well, the Promised Land and Manchester United podcast. Like the video, subscribe, leave a comment, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss a show. And follow us on social media at @_ Scott Saunders, at _Rob_B, and at Promised Land MU for the show as well. So just set us up here, Rob, because I'm going to share for the benefit of those who are watching. Apologies if you're not. You're going to miss out on this if you're listening on audio, but I'll try my best to talk through what we're going to display on screen on YouTube. But just set us up here, Rob, because you've gone and done your twittering and caused a bit of a stir.
There's a surprise, a stir on Twitter. Yeah, look, I think there's so many factors that are going on at Manchester United at the moment that are maybe out of Eric Ten Hag's control, and I give him some grace on that. What I don't kind of give him some grace on and understanding is that if you've got any kind of option here, Scott, you've got to consider it. If you can change stuff at ground level, then maybe change it. Consider it at very least. And one of the words that I always describe Eric as consistently is conservative. And what I mean by that is that he will try and keep things smaller in his remit. He's not a very extreme character, is he? He's not a Jose, or he's not a kind of gregarious manager. He wants to keep control. He wants to keep it small. And I understand why he picks the same players. It's the same with Ole. People would say, oh, Ole's got favourites. And I would say, no, he's not got favourites. He's just got players he trusts. I think it's the same for Ten Hag. So setting this up, I think that there are options that Eric Ten Hag can take against Brentford. I think there are changes that he can make. And then he's going to have to decide whether he pulls the trigger on those changes, because I get the feeling he won't make many, but I think he probably should.
So I'm just going to share. Also, actually, by the way, if you're following us on the YouTube channel and you want us to do lives more often, like the other day, please let us know, because I think we will have the facility to do it moving forward. Not today, obviously, but let us know. Get involved in the comments as well. But just for the benefit of those on audio, I'll explain here what Rob has chosen. But Rob, I'll put it out there. I don't agree with everything you're saying here.
Good.
So let's get this presented. So what we're seeing, Rob did a big long tweet talking about how the big pros are not cutting the mustard in a sense, and then came up with his own 11 for the game against Brentford in a 4-3-3. So just for the benefit of you on audio, if you're listening, Rob's 11 for the game. And this is considering Sergio Reguilon is not fit, right? So
Yes,
Ten Hag
yes.
might confirm that United are rushing him back today or that he's fit, and then maybe this conversation is moot in a sense. But Rob is calling for Altay Bayindir to come in and replace Onana, Dalot, Varane, Harry Maguire, and Johnny Evans at left back to push Amrabat into midfield, along with Hannibal and Mason Mount. Anthony back on the right, Garnacho on the left, and Rasmus Hojlund through the middle. And we'll talk about him later on in the show. But obviously there, Rob, you're making a number of calls, as in to drop Onana, to take Amrabat into the midfield, which I do agree with, but Johnny Evans at left back at 35 is a bit of a concern. There's no Bruno Fernandes in that midfield as the club captain, and no Marcus Rashford either. So what's your thinking here?
I'm thinking several things, but I'll try and explain it from back to front, because I think like none of us can pretend that senior players at the football club, the big players at the football club are performing. They're not performing. And that's why you're losing football matches. Especially, it's not just losing, Scott. It's the way you're losing. That, I think, is the massive concern for me. So just to kind of talk through the 11, because there are kind of caveats to a lot of this, is why do you pick X, Y, and Z? Well, I would call it resting, not dropping, first and foremost. Yeah, it's very easy to make it and say it's a drop and it become a sensational headline. But I think Man United, when you look at the selection that Ten Hag makes kind of every week, most of it is very predictable, isn't it? We know the system, we know the players. That is not working at the moment. And we can moan about injuries until we're blue in the face. But one of the things people have said to me at Old Trafford when I talk to fans is the same things. Well, even if all these players who are injured are fit, would he change it? I think that's a really key question, because if you've got other players, you've got to use them, haven't you? You know, we know Mason Mount, he's brought him straight back in. So let's just look at the back to the front. We'll talk with Onana's first, yeah, if we go with that. I think the whole thing with Onana is I still actually have faith in Onana. I still think long term, I think it's way too early to be overly worried about whether he can do the job. We talked about David De Gea, didn't we, in the last show, and about De Gea's year one and how there's a mirror here. And I do think that when things are so bad in front of Onana, Scott, it's difficult to blame him. However, we can blame him, can't we, for like bad back passes out, for bad saves, for going to ground and all of those things. You've just bought a goalkeeper that was a first choice last year and played something like 35 first team games in the Turkish league. If you didn't have any intention to play him, Scott, then why did you buy him? That's a big question. Back up, but Scott, you're going to play him for 5 weeks during the African Cup of Nations, right? So
this is not confirmed yet.
What's not confirmed?
Onana's reintegration into that team.
Oh, Onana's already said that he's going to play for them. I think he has already said that.
Yeah, I haven't seen that.
He did a tweet earlier on saying, you know, he wasn't playing for his country for certain reasons, and now he's really happy to be back in the fold. So I think Onana will almost certainly be going to the Africa Cup of Nations. We'll see, though, as you said, that could change. But if you're going to do that, that's why you bought this lad for £4 million as cover for those 5 weeks. Wouldn't it be good to give him some minutes now while Onana's struggling? So I think that's why you have to do it. I don't think that Bayindir is better than Onana, because, again, that's subjective. I think Onana's the better goalkeeper. But I think at this moment, it does not hurt pulling Onana out at the firing line. Just like Fergie did with De Gea all those years ago, where he took his number one out and thought, right, go sit on the bench for 2-3 weeks. Let's work this out. Let's take the pressure off you. The worst thing that could happen for Onana, Scott, is to play this game against Brentford and get done in the match. It's like the worst thing, and then go away for international break and for that to be hanging over him.
Do you not think that, just to counteract that point, I don't think the De Gea comparison is relevant, because I think they're both at different stages of their career. Onana's like mid-peak, starting to enter the peak years of his career. David De Gea was 20. So, you know, this is different. David De Gea hadn't even grown into his body yet. This is how, you know, he couldn't collect crosses he was getting bullied, this kind of thing. Andre Onana's having to deal with the fact that he's making like fundamental errors in terms of goalkeeping, but also giving the ball away. But he's been brought in to obviously start attacks and this kind of thing. And there's a fair argument to say that look at that back two, Harry Maguire and Rafa Varane. That's an Ole Gunnar Solskjaer centre-back pairing with Dalot as well. That's Ollie's. So Lisandro Martinez, I think, is really important to the build-up play, and they don't have him. But leaving Onana out here to take him out of the firing line, I think could be just as damaging for his confidence as if it was that he was staying in goal and actually made another mistake. I mean, Onana's been brought in to be the number one. He wouldn't have agreed to this move if he wasn't the number one. I think he needs a bit of faith. I think Erik Ten Hag needs to show him faith. And then what if Bayern Dia comes in and makes another mistake? Because there's no guarantee that he is the perfect goalkeeper either. And he's not, because he's not. He's meant to be the number two. And I think he came in on those terms as well. So for me, I don't think you can drop Onana personally. And I probably wouldn't do it either. But I think he's got to play through this personally, Onana. And I think you're damaging probably his ego and his confidence even more by taking him out of the firing line. And you're going into an international break as well. So it's not a case of giving him a break, because he's going to have 2 weeks of a break anyway.
Look, I completely actually agree with you in complete context of what you're saying, 100%. I think what I'm talking about as well is senior players failing, and how do you react to senior players failing? And I think the whole thing is that I do not believe that Bandir is a better goalkeeper than Onana. I really don't. I think Onana is the better goalkeeper. I think that it's about a body of work, and it's also about putting the message to players that if you do not play well, you cannot be the starter. You're going to have to work your way up. Now, as you said there, Onana came to the football club because he's told that he's going to be the undisputed number one and X, Y, and Z, and everyone's happy with that, yeah? I don't think you can live in that universe, not in the Man United universe. There should be no automatic starters. I think Onana playing, for me, as you said there is always that theory that you play through bad form. You know, you play through it. But if that bad form is losing you football matches, you have to stop the bleeding somehow. If there's a big cut there, you've got to put a big Band-Aid on it and fix it. Now, as you said, Bandy, I wouldn't say he's the perfect goalkeeper, but if you weren't going to use him, then you shouldn't have bought him. You should have kept Kovar, and I think we'd be having a more expansive conversation now about a young goalkeeper who might be able to fill the boots temporarily, and people might be more happy about that. But I think you've just got to make some of these changes, Scott, as a leap of faith. I think that's where you are. I don't want Harry Maguire back in my team, but I feel that Harry Maguire is no better or worse than Victor Lindelof. So that's the way I kind of look at it. And that's why when I pick this team, it is more about that. It's about how can you shake things up at the core of your team and give players opportunity? Because I think that's the one thing I see missing in these scenarios, Scott, is that you just stick with the same 11, you bite your lip, and you try and fight your way through it. But we've seen too much now in a short period of time that these players are failing. You must use your squad in some capacity.
There's also the context here of Bayern Dia coming into a team that is struggling with his number one making a series of mistakes, and there being pressure on him to not make those mistakes.
Yeah.
And otherwise, you have two goalkeepers who are considered duds at the moment. So for me, that's not a change I'd make. I agree with your point overall, really, on the rotation options, but I just think goalkeeper's a different position, really.
Would you play Kovar if he was still at the club rather than Bandir?
I'd be more inclined to, but I probably still wouldn't. I mean, Kovar's gone to Bayer Leverkusen, who are doing really well and played in the Europa League twice. So he's not getting in goal for the league. Again, this is a step up, and Kovar's got less experience than Bayern Dia has. But probably I'd be more inclined to do it than I would be with Bayern Dia. But
So really, the debate is not whether you drop Onana or not; it's who comes in for Onana. So so my side of that coin is that shouldn't actually be the problem. The problem is the individual that you're having a problem with. So I think with Onana, he really feels like rabbit in headlights at the moment. When you see him in the games, there is something there that, in terms of his confidence, has been affected, and we know why. We know why. Everything in front of him is a mess, isn't it? He's making mistakes. So I don't think it's a problem resting a player and bringing him out. And like you said about Bayindir, like we're kind of judging him without ever seeing him, like in the United shirt. Like he might come in and be sensational and make 12 saves in the game, and we might go, wow, this lad, we didn't think he was that good, but here we are now. He's coming to foot. He is hungry. He wants his chance. We can't judge that, Scott, till we see it. So unless you give someone that opportunity, you see, that's the way I look at this, is that it's not more about what you're bringing in. It's about how you make that evaluation of whether a player goes to the bench. But I'm with you. Like, I get it. Like, Onana is the senior goalkeeper and is more likely to play. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, also like in the context of, and I think I'll come to this point on a few occasions during this conversation. If you rest your number one goalkeeper, that is not a rest. That is you're dropped. Erik Ten Hag falls out with Andre Onana. That you've seen with Sancho. He kept him out of the team. And look, we're over a month since, and this situation is not resolved. That's a breaking of trust and confidence. The media will have a field day with that. So, yeah, I mean, let us know in the comments. Should this be the time that Andre Onana is substituted out? He's had 10 games in goal and was the Champions League final goalkeeper last season.
Yeah.
And already out of the team. Anyway, let's go back for Rob.
Yeah.
You've gone Dalot, Varane, Maguire, and Johnny Evans at left back. I think that's the curious one here.
Mm-hmm.
I'll explain what I would do. This is pending confirmation on Reguilon, by the way. I mean, if Reguilon can play, I think both Rob and I here will say that he should play. And in that case, I'd probably stick with the back three that you've got plus Reguilon at left back. If Reguilon isn't fit, I'd probably switch Dalot to left back and Lindelof in at right back, because I think it's crucial, really, that Amrabat goes to midfield. But give your explanation here.
Yeah, the reason why I've done this and kind of put this forward, as you said, is it is dependent on Reguilon's fitness. We will know more very soon about Reguilon. People were saying, "Oh, but wasn't he sick?" No, he actually had an injury as well. He had a hamstring problem, and that's we were initially told that might not clear up until after the international break. So that's why I kind of did this team like this. But I got hundreds of responses on Twitter about this back four, and mainly about Johnny Evans. And people saying, well, Johnny Evans can't play left back. Johnny Evans has played left back in his career. He has played it before.
He's also 35.
But he's older, of course. He's 35. And I understand the concerns about fitness. And I think I was one that actually put that forward about, can you do a whole game there? But it's more about how Man United are setting up, Scott, than just a very basic 4-1-4-1 on a bit of paper. Because on paper, I get what people are saying. And it was quite interesting because when people were responding to the tweet, they clearly were only looking at the team and not actually reading what I'd written about the team, because I think that context is more important here. I think with Johnny Evans, when Man United are going in transition from a three at the back, that's where it tends to be now with Ten Hag, and finding that those players shift across, allowing someone to go forward, play inverted into midfield or down the wing. I think when you look at the balance with United, it's been all wrong. Yeah, so Amrabat's played that role and gone into midfield, and I think that actually has worked. What hasn't worked is what happens behind Amrabat. So Amrabat has not really been able to cover the defensive positions, because as a midfielder, what's he doing, Scott? He's stepping out, isn't he, to go and meet people. He's a combative, aggressive player. I think if you played that back four, Evans, Maguire, Varane and Dalot, there, again, for me, are issues with certain players. So I look at Victor Lindelof, and I think Victor Lindelof is a massive problem. And I think it's a sliding scale with United fans. Like, some believe that and some just don't. And I think if you play him at right back and then move Dalot to left back, I think you've got the same problem that you've had the last few weeks. Nothing's changed there. That's just same players, just moving it around a little bit. A lot of people tweeted me as well and went, no way should Harry Maguire be in this team. Harry Maguire is still an England international, and Harry Maguire is not completely useless. If he's at your football club, you have to find ways to make him useful. If he's going to sit on your bench, you have to be prepared to give him minutes at times. Now, looking at this team here, I'm happy for Dalot to push up the wing here and go and help Anthony and go and kind of rekindle that partnership that they've had at times, and let those three at the back sit in the central roles, because Brentford are only really going to play Mbeumo and Wissa in those areas. And if you've got three outnumbering two, I'm all right with it, even if you've not got the quickest. I'm the one. I wanted Harry Maguire sold, Scott. I wanted him gone. But I think Evans and Maguire on that side can look after that side with Mbeumo and make sure they don't get run behind. That's really important. And then
You
I
do
think
have wing backs though.
you've got wing backs, and that.
So
But this is where you're going to have to do other parts of your job. So, like, further up the field, if Anthony's playing, that's why I would play Anthony ahead of Bruno Fernandes on that side. So, these things are all interconnected, aren't they? So Anthony's going to have to come back and help Delo in those coverage areas. And it means that Garnacho will have to at least cover the space in front of Evans. But I'm not saying Johnny Evans is going to be a fullback. Like people saying, oh, you got him there at left back and he's, he can't do
he will
back.
inevitably have to be at times, though. Like he has to be.
And I'm happier for him controlling what's around him and behind him than Amrabat. That's the way I look at this. And you said it there at the start of the show. Amrabat has to be in midfield. That, for me, is the sliding scale of responsibility here. You have to find a way to get Amrabat in front of the defence. Because if he's in front of the defence, Scott, you're going to do better than with Casemiro in front of the defence. That's just the way I look at it. If you play 4-2-3-1, then yes, Amrabat and Casemiro might work, and you might be able to bring Lindelof in. I do agree that playing Delo on the left and Lindelof on the right is, again, probably the conservative decision. That's probably what the manager will do. Will he bring Maguire back? I probably think he won't. But I'm saying, even though I'm not a fan of Harry Maguire at all and do not want him at the football club, I think Harry Maguire in that central role will be just as good, if not better, than Victor Lindelof, who I think is failing at the moment.
I don't necessarily disagree with that. I think I'm not against Maguire coming back in because needs must at the minute. I think,
and he played well in the cup game, and so did Evans. They both played well.
Yeah, and obviously we're talking here in the context of if Reguilon isn't fit, and this might be a conversation which is just irrelevant if Erik Ten Hag confirms that he'll play in his press conference. United play on Saturday. I think Ten Hag's speaking to the press in about 4 hours time from where we're recording here, but obviously it'll be closer to the time once this actually goes out, and you may even know that Reguilon is going to play when you listen to this. Anyway, that's what I would do. I'd bring in Maguire, switch Lindelof to right back, and switch Dalot across. And then you kind of get your back three in there anyway, who are all natural centre halves without the... And Dalot can obviously move into midfield as well to create extra number in there, but which he's done before.
Do you think... I just had one thing there, Scott, because you that's what you would do. You're playing Lindelof, who is a centre-back at right-back, and do we believe that Lindelof has more energy, more mobility, more everything than Johnny Evans?
Yes.
I think that's a real key question, because I don't. I think Johnny Evans, even at 35, can read the game and slow the game down more and allow more control in that part of the park than Victor Lindelof. Victor Lindelof makes you play quick because he is so mentally slow and physically slow. I think Johnny Evans is better at tucking in. Johnny Evans will look after the channel and go, this is the area I need to look after. For me, I would be worried at Lindelof at right back, because Lindelof can invert and maybe go into midfield. I think he's a good enough ball player. But I think in this shape, do I like Lindelof and Varane as a partnership on that side? I dislike that as much as I dislike Maguire and Evans on the left. I just trust Johnny Evans more than I trust Victor Lindelof. That's just a personal observation.
Anyway, let us know. Back four. Maybe Reguilon's back. But anyway, we talked about Amrabat being back in midfield. I think we both agree on that, Rob. We've tried this, and he might still try this. He might play Amrabat at left back again.
Yeah.
But obviously, Amrabat was, I don't want to say at fault for 2 goals the other day, but like obviously he was the one that lofted the ball forward for the winning goal for Galatasaray. Because his passing options were limited, admittedly.
Exactly. And he got dragged out of position as well. Like when he's going to the player, that's a typical mistake that someone who doesn't play the position every week does, because they're just trying to be aggressive. But
yeah, Amrabat, for me, you brought him in to be a midfielder to keep the solidity in there, to keep it ticking over. And I think what you're seeing is at the minute, you're trying to compensate for a position that is United are admittedly struggling in with 3 left backs out injured. But the midfield is so open at the moment that I feel like you need Amrabat in there from the beginning. If you want Onana to have an option direct through the lines or even someone to collect the ball from him, probably Amrabat's your best bet for that. Remember in this or not in this fixture, but against Brentford last season, they tried it with Christian Eriksen and he got eaten up. And I think Amrabat will probably be a little bit more composed and a little bit better if United did want to have that option through the middle. And Amrabat obviously offers the extra security in there, offers extra legs, offers probably better progressive passing from that position. And I think that the time might have come now. You could even try this and probably be safe in the knowledge by the time the international break is over, you do have a left back. So I feel like if you can plaster over it for one game and get Amrabat in the midfield as soon as you can,
Stop the bleeding.
I think that's the most important thing. But just a word on him before we move on.
Yeah, look, I think I've been really impressed with some of the stuff Amrabat has done. He's playing out of position, and I think that he's shown real intelligence in the few games that he's played in terms of going into midfield and helping out and being a help player. And I think that that's actually kind of been successful. But you've lost games, obviously everyone's down on that. For me, Scott, it's the midfield as a kind of cohesive unit and the chemistry that they can bring. Now, this midfield here, like as I said, if you're playing a 4-1-4-1, which is kind of what the manager has been doing in recent weeks at Old Trafford when he's playing transition, is that how do you make that personnel fit what you're trying to do? This system with these players could very easily be 4-3-3 in a blink of an eye. You could do that. You could also be 4-2-3-1 in a blink of an eye. You just drop Mount a little bit deeper, and then you've kind of got you going back. You could then play the 4-1-5 press that you were doing last season. So it's about combination of players, Scott. And for me, this three of Amrabat, Mount, and Hannibal feels just in terms of what I've seen, the right kind of combo in terms of their work rate, about what they could do together as a unit and how to control that big chunk of the pitch in the middle. Because as you said at the start, that's really where Man United lost games, isn't it? United have lost games in the space between midfield and defence. And it's been a chasm, hasn't it? Players running through. Icardi on a holiday. I'm just jogging through the middle as a centre forward and no one's tracked me. No one's done a thing. Casemiro's 12 feet behind me. And it's too easy. So I think Amrabat is really essential, but I think it's then about what you do with the other two and how you get those in. And obviously, people are going to say to me, Rob, where's Bruno Fernandes? So I think that's probably the talking point there.
I mean, I don't disagree. I think that the energy point that you get from this midfield is completely valid, and I don't disagree with that. You have to manage the situation though, and as I talk about with Onana versus Bayern, if you drop the captain, you're in for a whole mass of problems. That is an international break's worth of Erik Ten Hag dropped his captain. Erik Ten Hag has fallen out with Bruno Fernandes. You know the way it's going to go. It's going to be win. Noise.
Not if you win.
There's no guarantees. I think I know that you put a tweet out about the drop in Bruno Fernandes, and it was contentious to say the least. Where obviously Bruno's numbers and his statistics are, in terms of chance creation, this kind of thing, are well far and above like most other players, even in the Premier League and across Europe. I mean, he's one of the chief creators out there. Personally, I think I would probably go with it depends if you want to bring Anthony back in, but I think Bruno has to be in there really. The Casemiro question, I think for this time, I don't disagree with the fact that Casemiro playing number 8 is a potential problem. I feel like, but again, I think that you look at that 3 there, as much as Hannibal's energy is really important, I'd probably drop him to the bench. And I think you bought Amrabat in, and I think everybody really thought, well, the midfield will be something like Amrabat, Casemiro, Bruno, with Mount somewhere, or Amrabat, Mount, Casemiro, or Amrabat, Mount, Bruno. But one of 3 or 4 connections in there. And I feel like Ten Hag, before he dropped both of them, is probably going to have to try Amrabat, Casemiro, Bruno Fernandes in there. And I think maybe putting Mount on the wing or putting Bruno on the wing will be the way that he does go this time around. But like I say, I see the point you're trying to make there on the energy. I think that's really important.
Yeah, on the energy, and also about the whole thing with Bruno and the stats. Yeah, Bruno gets great stats as a number 10 or as a wide right player. Those stats, I think, become null and void when we're talking about him doing a different job on the football pitch. So, he's not being the greatest creative entity from number 8. That's just not true. So I think this is where people I don't want to say skew it, but I know again that this ends up being about favouritism. It's about players, who they like and who they dislike. I always say the same thing about Manchester United footballers. I don't really have any favourites. I just want to win a football match. I look at the game as in, like, who can you put out there to do the job to win the game, and that's all I care about. I don't care who gets the stats. I'm not interested in that side of it. I think if you play Bruno here in this game, in this system on the right as the starter, I've got no problems with that. I think Bruno can do that job. I would put Anthony in there because I think you need a little bit more energy in that part of the park in terms of the control in the press. And I think Anthony, it's time to bring him back, isn't it? He's in the squad. He's been training. So he was the starter to start off with, wasn't he, in that position? And, he was rotated in and out. I will not be surprised if Anthony comes off the bench and Bruno starts there. For me, it's looking at that midfield three and about the combination. And I feel better with Amrabat, Mount and Hannibal today than I would feel about Amrabat, Mount and Bruno, or Amrabat, Hannibal and Bruno. I think Bruno, as a number 8, gets exposed over and over and over again. His ball retention's poor, his work's poor, he's erratic, he's indisciplined. And those things have to be addressed. You can't just say, well, you're the captain and we don't want a big storm in the press. I want to win the next football match. I think that midfield three is a better midfield three to go against what Brentford do than Bruno. If you're going to pick players just because you're scared that you might get criticised that you drop them, then you're done already. We've already got to the point, Scott, haven't we, about Casemiro? Like, you're saying it now, you said it the other day, you now agree about Casemiro. I think this has been a 4 to 6 week issue that we're now getting to a point where, like, we might have to drop this guy because he can't run in those areas at the moment, but he's on a lot of money and he's a star, isn't he? He's won Champions League medals. Well, I think you have to call it on the football and the tactics. And I look at this and I think that's where Bruno, you're right, it'd be a massive story, wouldn't it? Like, Twitter would explode. But if you win the game, it doesn't matter. If you put a team out there that wins, and sometimes you've got to gamble on these things. And I think with Bruno, he's as culpable as any of the senior players, I think, at the moment in terms of his form, that he can do the number 8. He's just not very good at it. So, like, why do it? Play him on the right.
Well, the alternative here is, I know that this is something I've said this week. Even I think Ten Hag is trying to play a system that probably doesn't really have the right fits for.
Mm-hmm.
So in that case, I mean, is it worth potentially compromising what you're trying to do in order to retain a bit of solidity in there and say Amrabat and Casemiro as a 2 with Bruno in front of them? Like, it maybe is that a little bit more, do you get a bit more solidity out of that? And isn't the most important thing keeping a clean sheet to start with, so you have something to build off?
Totally. Look, if you're going to go into this game thinking we are playing 4-2-3-1, I completely admit that you're probably playing Casemiro and Amrabat there. Now, it might turn out that Amrabat ends up starting as a left back. I would be more shocked if Ten Hag changes it, but less shocked if he just goes with what he's been doing, because that's the kind of manager he is. But for me, the reason why I put this team out there is that what you've been doing the last 6 to 8 weeks has not worked. It hasn't. It's worked in pieces, but there are big chunks of the game that are being bypassed here. And you cannot do that to just pick players that are your ones that have got the stats from last year, and this player's got this stat, and that's like, you can't do it like that. You have to look at it game to game, I think. And I think Man United have failed in that aspect because they've got injuries. And, as someone said to me at Old Trafford, plenty of people said, even if these players weren't injured, would they actually even feature? Would they even play? So that midfield for me is young and hungry and has more control, and definitely would get the ball in the deck more and get the ball to those front three in a more fluid way. Yeah, Bruno Fernandes, absolutely the best passer of the ball we've got in that final aspect of the game, but he's not the best passer of the ball from the centre of the park. If anyone tells me that, they're not watching Man United. That's not what we see every week with Bruno. The deeper Bruno is, the less Bruno becomes. And I think when you're forcing him to play, like, he's been playing in a double pivot at times, Scott. He's playing as a 6. And I've been like, he's got no out ball from the 6. He gets the ball and it's just chip into channels, and there's no expansiveness there. He can't do what Amrabat does, and he certainly can't do what Casemiro does. But then you're asking players to do things that they're not very good at when you have actually got options to change it.
Well, I personally looked at the Galatasaray game the other night and thought it wasn't only Bruno Fernandes who was doing that. That
Yeah,
that
it was a lot of
ball
them.
over the top. Mason Mount did it a number of times, and he's been actually praised for his performance. I'm not saying he played well.
Yeah.
Nobody played well the other day, apart from Hojlund, really. But I feel like Ten Hag, maybe this midfield, you'd probably be more inclined to do it, in my opinion, if United were in actually a decent patch of form. But I think the way that United are now, the pressure that he's under, I think if you're going to compromise something, you probably have to compromise the style of play. Like United played Brentford last season at Brentford, lost 4-0, and then Ten Hag made a change. They became more conservative throughout the rest of the season. The focus was keeping clean sheets. They kept the most clean sheets in the Premier League last season. Probably because, and I think Erik Ten Hag is trying to transition his style of play to a bit more of along the lines of what he would like United to do long term. But I just don't think he has the personnel yet. And I feel like the longer Ten Hag tries to persist with this, unless he changes something and puts more focus on security and keeping clean sheets, if he continues trying to play the way that he's playing at the expense of senior players as well, I think he's on a very slippery slope. And well, we'll see. We'll see which way he goes. But I agree with you. I don't think the way he's trying to play works. I think it's, like I said, hot potato. It's hot potato. It's hot potato. It's kick the ball forward as fast as you can. Try and beat teams on the transition. But United just don't control matches. And I feel like they need more security in there.
They do need more security, but I think I think the thing is, when we talk about style and what managers always want to do, it's always with best laid plans. Like, he's watching all of this on the training ground. I don't think for one moment, Scott, he's thinking that this is just about risk and reward. I don't think he's thinking, well, we'll give it a go and we'll see what happens. He's convinced from the data and the players that he's got that these players can do it. You just said there about Mount and Bruno, and I want to really highlight this. When we're looking at two midfielders doing the same thing or doing the same problem, are you looking at the senior player or are you looking at the other player? And for me, he takes his lead from Bruno. So Bruno is doing that. Mount's going to follow the lead. That's just the way it is. So
Mount was criticised heavily at Chelsea for not being good enough in retention.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah. And I think it's about a position. Like, Mount as well is learning the position as an 8, isn't he? Like, we all said that he wants to be an 8, but he's not really an 8 yet. He's getting there. But I think he's going to be more of a number 8 than Bruno Fernandes ever will be, just because of the way he works. So it is difficult, because you're right. You need to be able to you don't want to sacrifice creativity to get a clean sheet. But do you know what? Getting a clean sheet is the most important thing. That's where it starts. You've got to have that solid back five that kind of know what they're doing in front of a goalkeeper, because we haven't got that. And I think a lot of times, because the midfield is fractured. We're constantly, like you called it, hot potato. These players should not be playing hot potato, Scott. Like, they are on £200,000-300,000 a week. Like, they should not. You think Casemiro should be playing hot potato? No, you need to slow the game down. That's the way I think United need to do it. I don't think there's big systemic change that he can play, like a 4-2-3-1, and it just will all click. I think he will probably try these systems and keep trying to push on through it and find a way between 6 and 8 to support the forwards. And like, one thing we've not even said here, of course, on this team, is Marcus Rashford's not in it. So it's less controversial to drop Marcus or to bash Marcus than it is Bruno. But for me, they're our best two players. They both are underperforming at the moment. Therefore, they should both be sat on the bench.
Well, here you're proposing to drop Onana, Casemiro, Bruno Fernandes, and Marcus Rashford.
I am.
Which is a hell of a statement, Rob. Like, no matter,
massive.
I think you can do 2, possibly tops, and you can call it rotation. But I think 4 is, I don't want to say excessive, but it might be. And that, if it doesn't go your way, you're taking such a big risk here with players who are relatively untried. It was only a few weeks ago we were talking about Garnacho not ready to be a starter yet.
Yeah,
I think that he deserves another shot, just because Rashford is not, it looks bereft of confidence, really. So I'm in on trying out Garnacho. He's had a good week. He's had a newborn baby, and he's been called up the Argentina squad. He's looking more threatening, really, than most of United's forwards outside of Rasmus Hojlund. But yeah, I'm kind of with you on the Garnacho for Rashford shout. I don't know what he will do with Antony yet, but I probably think he's more inclined to bring him back in, just because he's tended to stick with him. But obviously, you've got a number of choices in midfield now, which is something that United couldn't have a few weeks ago with the injuries that they had and the suspensions and, players absent, this kind of thing. But I'll stop sharing my screen. That's been the entire conversation. But we both agree on Rasmus Hojlund playing. So let's talk somewhat positively for once, because I've said this the other day, and I actually, somebody said it on the show as well. Organisms adapt to their environment eventually. And we've seen this before. Remember when Bruno Fernandes joined? He's probably been one of the players really that has managed to prolong his output and his positives the longest from every player that United have signed. What you tend to see is United sign a player, they have a good immediate impact. They eventually fall into the habits of everybody else and then just become usurped in whatever mediocrity is around United at that point. And players just inevitably suffer and become a shell of their former selves. But at least Rasmus Hojlund at the moment is looking positive. I will say here that Rasmus Hojlund's first goal against Galatasaray came from a counter-attack. Rasmus Hojlund's second goal against Galatasaray came from a mistake where he ran from his own half.
Yeah.
United still will have a problem in build-up. We know that. That's so obvious. And you need to bring Hojlund into the game, create chances for him if he's going to get those tap-ins. But what we have seen is that Hojlund is a player that can thrive on chaos.
Definitely. And I think he gives you a little bit of X factor in those parts of the park. We might have to look, Scott. I know you were sharing your screen there. We just saw Mason Mount was trending, so I'm a bit worried about that. I don't know what that's about, but we'll see. While we're going live, that might sound like he might be injured or something like that. I'm not quite sure. We'll have to look into it. But I think with Rasmus Hojlund, I think you made some really good points from the last game and about his style of play. Is that it's about building that chemistry for him around him. So that I think is the biggest. That's the biggest point to play both Marcus and Bruno. Is that if long term Marcus and Bruno are your guys, then really you want them to build some chemistry, don't you, with the centre forward? I think the issue has been is not that as it stands. The issue has been all the holes in Man United's team. So I would not be surprised to see that the game starts again with Hojlund at the top and Marcus left and Bruno right. I think that's an easy choice. I'm saying that we probably need to make harder choices at this time. You said dropping 4 is maybe too much. I actually think if you dropped all 4 together, that's a nice statement to the collective. That's saying if you're not playing,
work though, Rob.
It has to work. You're right. It has to work. And the problem is though, if you do play them and it doesn't work, Scott, then you have literally got 2 to 3 weeks here of people saying that you're going to be sacked. Because if he does the same thing and it doesn't work, people will say he's lost a dressing room. People will say your senior players are not playing for you. You've lost a game against Brentford at home. So that's the risk here. And I actually think the reward is that if he does make changes and it works and you win the game, and even with those changes, I would want us to win that game against Brentford. If you do that, people then go, well, that's strong. This manager's strong. He's letting players know that their poor form will not be rewarded with repetitive picks. You called it last week a meritocracy, and that's the way it has to be, I believe, is that you've got to look at players and go, I don't care if you're the captain, don't care if you're on this amount of money, I don't care you got a new contract, Marcus, and I do find, Scott, it's a scale again, like Marcus, really easy to bash, gets hugely bashed. Other players like Casemiro as well, called it the other day, the Casemiro stands. It's like Ronaldo. You can't criticize them just because of all those medals. That shouldn't be like that. You have to pick a team. You have to pick 11 players. And I think that we'll see Garnacho get more minutes. I think he'll come in. But I think Anthony's the one there on that right, is that Anthony's not particularly creative, but Anthony will press and push in that area. And I think he'll help Garnacho, as you said, they're in transition. That's where United are, I think. I liked Hojlund's goal. He ran from deep. When as soon as he got it, I just screamed at telly, run. Because people kind of don't really know how fast he is. Like he's the fastest player at the football club. He's quicker than Marcus Rashford. He is in a straight line. And I think United can exploit that in weeks to come. If you're going to play a little bit of counter-attack and counter-press, get the ball to the 9 quickly. Let him dribble and run with it because he's got that. You say there about chaos. He can be an agent of chaos for Man United. And United can win football matches through those means.
I just don't think... Well, the way the Galatasaray played the other day, I think a better team than Man United would have smashed them. They would have beat them 5-6. probably.
I didn't think Galatasaray were that good.
No, that they weren't,
Honestly,
and that's why it's so damaging. Like there was no way they should have won that game. But
Galatasaray are not better than Brentford. They're not better than Brentford.
And Brentford will not give United the same opportunities or the same space to exploit, which is why I think Hojlund can do that, and it's obviously a massive benefit. And I think United probably play in a way where they want to create more of those opportunities for Hojlund to have space to run into and this kind of thing. But simple fact is United need to get better at actually build up play. And Hojlund has shown as well, he's had some disallowed goals, but there was the goal that was disallowed for offside the other day against Galatasaray as well. Shows a bit of composure that he has.
Definitely.
Like, even if he's collecting the ball in the box, you have to jink around a bit, find some space and shoot. And he's done that twice now. I think he's had 2 disallowed goals.
That was a brilliant goal, wasn't it? That was like United absolutely played the ball pop into the striker. And, if that had stood and we'd won the game, we'd be crowing about that, wouldn't we, for days, going, look, we're back. we can do this. So they can do it. And sometimes those marginal offsides go against you.
So, Hojlund should get his start again. I'm even seeing some people suggesting Martial should maybe come in, and whether that's on the left side. But anyway, Hojlund's brought in to be that main number 9. And I think somebody also pointed out as well, you see Martial's smile after Hojlund scored that goal from end to end.
Yeah.
It was Martial knows that now that somebody's here to take his place, so he doesn't have to fake injuries anymore or something like that. Maybe
I read that, and I also read a lot of people saying, we've seen already in this short window that Hojlund's not good enough for Man United. I've read a lot of that already, and that's coming from Man United fans. Like, this is not coming from Arsenal fans, Liverpool fans, or whoever. It's coming from United fans going, he can't do what we want. And you're thinking, well, we're not created anything for him at all yet, and the team is fractured. So what are people expecting? So this is why I think, Scott, people will always want changes, but what do you change? And that's a big call, of course. Right. I'm not changing Hojlund anytime soon. I'm not changing him. Even if he's not playing well, he's playing. Like, we spent 77 million on him. He has to play.
There we go. There's your 11 from us. Let us know what you would do in the comment section. And we'll be back after that Brentford game next week to talk about, we go into an international break, so who knows what we'll be talking about. Probably a bit longer term. I did want to finish the show today, Rob. Have you seen Beckham yet?
No, not yet. I've not seen it. Did you watch it? What did you
I've
think?
seen it all. Now, we haven't really talked about David Beckham before. How fondly do you look back on his United career? What did you think of him at the time? This kind of thing. The documentary is very much worth a watch, by the way. I will say that David Beckham is, along with Eric Cantona, probably even more so than Cantona. Cantona was the one that first captured my imagination, but David Beckham is the one who, was like many teenagers or 10-year-olds or whatever, like the one for a lot of us, and he was that for me as well.
Yeah, I think Bex, for me, I love it that Bex is a United fan. I like that first and foremost. He still loves United, doesn't he? And I think in that period, post 1999, for those few years, there was no one bigger in the world than David Beckham in many ways. The ironic thing about it, Scott, was that he wasn't always first choice. He wasn't, not in Fergie's eyes. Fergie's would change things quite a bit, and Bex would play on the right, Bex would play in midfield. Sometimes Bex would sit on the bench. Do you know what? When he sat on the bench, no one really said a thing about it.
Rob, no.
Listen,
no,
I'm going there. I'm going there. But I think the thing is with Bex,
no. Do you not remember?
Oh,
Rob?
I do remember. I was there, man. I was at the games. I was there. I'm not having selective memory. I think the thing is with Bex, and I've always say this, and it's the same thing I crow about in terms of players, is that for me, individuals, it's Cantona and Robson and no one else. That's the way I look at Man United. That's me. That's who I look at. I think Bex was fantastic for United, and I think he served us so well, much more than I think some people do kind of go towards. But I also think that because he was such an icon of that period and that kind of, early 2000s, end of the 90s period, is that he also gets remembered with more than maybe what he was. Some people underrate him and some people overrate him. But for me, David Beckham doesn't mean that. I don't look at Bex and think, oh, I miss Bex. I don't. There are other players, like I said, those two, and then everyone else falls into line. People said to me, well, But what about Scholes? What about Giggs? What about the top list? Still, to me, I saw all those guys in the flesh. I watched them every week, and they were fantastic for us. And it's very easy now that Man United are a complete disaster to look back with misty eyes. So I haven't watched the Beck's documentary yet because I don't feel that about Becks, but I know that a lot of people do, and I understand that. He was an icon, wasn't he? The thing I really remember, Scott, is the England goal that got United, that got England into
just
the
so
Euros.
happens to be that was 21 years ago today.
Right. I remember where I was. I was in Morocco watching it, and I remember sitting there with a load of England fans and that ball going in the back of the net and the place going mad in Morocco. And I remember I felt so proud because he was one of ours, because he was United boy. That's why I wanted it. But that moment, I think, identified what David Beckham became to English football, wasn't it? That he was the saviour. And I was also there when he got sent off at the World Cup. And looking at that, and I thought he was demonised, effigies being hung at Premier League grounds. I thought that was disgusting. And again, that was also why I rooted for Becks, because I'm glad that he kind of came back and did all those things. But at the very end, Scott, the manager had run out of use for him and he wanted to go to Real Madrid. And that was that.
Well, you haven't watched the documentary.
What did he say? What did he say? Tell me. What did he say? Because I'm interested.
Never wanted to go.
You see, this was the whole thing, was that he basically, United accepted an offer from Barcelona, wasn't it, originally? And he said, no, I will only go to Real Madrid. But he wanted to stay at United, but the manager didn't want him. The manager ran out of use. And do you know why it was? Like, I don't know if they say this in the documentary, so I'm saying it blind, but it was because Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was so good on the right. So the manager was playing Ole on the right, and people were like, he's out of position. But Ole was playing so well as the right.
Actually pinned that on Carlos Queiroz.
What did he? What did he say?
Well, that was, yeah. And Gary Neville said it as well, that it was, they were pushing for Ollie there. And Ollie said,
really?
I was actually quicker than Becks. He said,
see, I'm saying this blind. I'm just knowing from my own previous knowledge. And the funny thing was that Ole was playing really well in that position. And I'm not surprised, because Carlos Queiroz had such a huge pull tactically towards Ferguson and made a lot of those choices because United was stylistically changing. So, I will watch it, and I do understand why people love Becks, and I still look at Becks like that. He's still one of ours, isn't he? That's the way it will always be. He's a United boy. It's in his heart. Yeah, that does mean something to me.
So many, you mentioned some people think that he's overrated, some underrated. I'm very much in the underrated camp. His profile goes before him for what he was as a footballer. He had so many incredible moments for United and for England. He came back from, demonization, probably with the likes of which we haven't seen. Obviously it happens a lot nowadays with social media, but at that point, I remember
socials in those days.
I remember being 9-10 years old and seeing pictures of effigies on the front of newspapers, which are hanging from buildings, and how anybody could come through that, especially considering 98 World Cup was his lowest point and what he did the season after.
Yeah. And it wasn't even that bad at the World Cup. It was just a silly thing, but he got so attacked.
Help. Glenn Hoddle pinned the blame on Beckham after that. And he said, yeah, well, he got a red card and it cost us the game. And obviously that didn't help. It's the way English fans saw it. But yeah, for me, David Beckham, one of my heroes. And
best crosser of the ball I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm. James Ward-Prowse, Rob?
Second. No, Beck, honestly, the way Becks would cross the ball, that was always just. Do you know what? I was at the Soccer Aid game not so long ago, and he was taking corners. Yeah, going back a couple of years ago, and he still crossed the ball better than anyone I've ever seen. Even at this age, he's like swinging the ball and the ball arcing in. That there was nothing better, Scott, in the old days of Gary Neville overlapping, stopping the ball, pulling it back, and Becks being in that position to just swing it in. And it's an underrated skill. He was the best in the world at that. I really do think that. And he was a better passer of the ball than anyone gave him credit. And I'm surprised he didn't develop into a central midfield. That's what we always believed, that Becks would come inside. Played the Champions League final in the centre, didn't he? In 99. We moved into the centre and we were all horrified. We were like, we need him on the right. But he played central because of Fergie's choice. And never became really that central fulcrum, did he? He played for England there at times, didn't he? But in his club career, just was always that right-sided, the last of the right-sided midfielders. Like now we play 4-2-3-1 and we play wide forwards. He was like the last of that midfield, 4-4-2. someone who played on the right and was just so effective.
The profile of what he probably did play in central midfield towards the end of his career for PSG and this kind of thing, but that's
Milan.
in the late stages of Milan. But yeah, for me, got all the kind of tools that you look at in a modern player now. I think he'd probably thrive on the right side of a midfield, at right wing back, this kind of thing. He'd probably be that kind of player. But yeah, if you haven't checked it out, it came out earlier this week.
I will definitely
and watch it. It's a good 4-parter.
And his work rate was underrated. He was a real worker. But I think all those United boys of that period were just work monsters. They never stopped moving. They never put their heads down. They were never beaten. They were a real team that were never beaten, Scott. Like, they could see games. I remember losing, was it 6-3 at Southampton? But it used to galvanise those boys. They used to come back and go, right, we want to prove something. Our lot now, they could do with a teaspoon of that, couldn't they?
Maybe they should watch it before the Brentford game. Anyway, Brentford visit United on Saturday, and we'll be back to dissect it next week. Rob will be at the game tomorrow as well, but we're going into an international break after that, so United need to win. They
Can't believe I'll be there.
But that's it from us. Subscribe to the channel wherever you get your pods, and watch us on YouTube as well, the Promised Land of Manchester United podcast. Like the video, subscribe, leave a comment on anything. Tell us your 11 for the Brentford game.
Please do.
Hit the notification bell as well so you don't miss a show. And let us know if you'd like us to do more live shows as well. Follow us on social media too, at @_Scott Saunders, at @_Rob_B, and at Promised Land MU for the show as well. Rob, thank you very much for another show. Everyone, see you soon. Fingers crossed United can get 3 points because they bloody need them. Anyway, see you soon. Thanks for listening, and bye.